There was no before, not even the whisper of a thought, not even the weight of silence. It was a stillness beyond all stillness, where neither time nor darkness had a place to rest. It was an unheld breath of existence, not yet aware it could be breathed. The emptiness wasn't cold or void, it simply was not anything at all. In that unmeasured pause before anything began, reality slept in a cradle of pure nothingness, as though the idea of being had not yet dreamed itself awake. And then, within that absolute quiet, something infinitesimally delicate stirred. The first spark was not a sound, nor a flash, it was a soft unfolding, like the thought of warmth taking form. From the still sea of nothing, a trembling vibration began, gentle as the heartbeat of an idea. It did not announce itself with fury or light, but hummed with an ancient, tender purpose. That hum carried potential, the promise of galaxies yet unborn, of time waiting to be stretched and shaped. Within its hush, the first seed of existence began to breathe, slow and uncertain, as if unsure if it was allowed to be real. In that first flicker, everything that would ever be was contained, every star, every atom, every memory of life that would someday arise. But at that moment, it was only the faintest rhythm, expanding like a sigh from an invisible shore. The spark had no color, no form, yet it shimmered with possibility. It grew quietly, as if testing its strength, pushing softly against the boundaries of nothingness that surrounded it. And as it grew, the stillness began to ripple, awakening gently from its timeless sleep. The quiet began to shift, not abruptly but like dawn spilling slowly across a sleeping world. Where there had been perfect absence, now there was the faintest notion of energy, a hum that filled the empty expanse without breaking its serenity. This was the first heartbeat of creation, calm yet powerful, a tender awakening that would one day give rise to suns and skies. It was not chaos yet, only the awareness of becoming. The spark didn't seek to conquer the silence, it sought to join it, to sing softly within it. The silence did not resist. It welcomed the new warmth, folding around it like a mother around her newborn thought. The first spark quivered, finding rhythm in its pulse, its glow faint but steady. It began to stretch outward, feeling the texture of its own being. For the first time, there was difference, something and not something, presence and absence. The boundary between what was and what was not began to shimmer, delicate as the skin of a dream just before waking. From that moment, time whispered into motion. Not as seconds or hours, but as unfolding, a gentle opening of what had once been closed. The first spark's hum deepened into flow, a stream of becoming that expanded outward in every direction at once. Space began to bloom, not in violence, but in grace. The nothingness, still vast, allowed this new thing to grow within it, to dance softly in its embrace. It was the universe's first motion, the tender sigh of everything that would ever exist. This motion carried memory within it, even before there were minds to remember. It was as if the universe, in its first breath, already knew it would one day look back and wonder how it began. The gentle spark pulsed, sending ripples through the stillness, ripples that would one day become waves of light, stars, and the shapes of worlds. The nothingness was no longer empty, it had become a canvas brushed by the earliest hint of creation. And though it might have been invisible, something sacred had shifted. The hush that had ruled before was now alive, vibrant with unseen potential. The first spark was the promise that from even the purest silence, something could bloom. It was soft, not explosive, as though existence itself preferred to arrive as a lullaby instead of a roar. Its warmth spread through the void, touching what wasn't there and making it something new. Within that glow, space began to learn its own language. Distances unfolded, gently stretching into patterns not yet formed. Time began to flow in slow streams, tracing soft lines through the newness. The spark pulsed, feeding the growing weave of energy that wrapped around itself, spiraling into the foundation of everything. The emptiness, once still, now hummed with a melody that would never end, a song of being, sung in the first light of the universe. The first quiet was not gone, it remained, woven deep into the roots of all creation. Even as energy flowed and distances stretched, that ancient stillness lingered beneath, like a heartbeat beneath a dream. It was the reminder of what came before, the eternal calm from which everything had risen. Every motion carried its memory, every light was born from its depth. The spark did not erase the silence, it became its voice. As the spark expanded, it began to shimmer with countless possibilities. Each flicker contained a whisper of what could be a universe of choices sleeping within a single moment. The stillness bent gently around it, allowing it to grow without breaking. There was balance here, between nothing and becoming, between silence and motion. The harmony of that balance was perfect, a lullaby the cosmos still hums in its deepest corners. The energy continued to unfold, graceful and infinite. It did not yet know form, nor light as we would see it. It was pure essence, pure potential, stretching itself like soft fabric across the face of emptiness. The universe was learning how to exist, how to breathe, how to hold. Its warmth touched the void and found it vast enough to cradle all beginnings. The spark had become a glow now, shimmering softly, painting the first hues of existence upon the canvas of nothing. The hush around it deepened but did not vanish. The quiet became the backdrop, the sacred silence that allowed creation to sing. Without it, the spark would have no rhythm, no space to dance. Together, they formed a duet, silence and sound, nothing and everything, embracing each other in a tender, endless cycle. This was the first harmony, older than stars, gentler than any dawn that would follow. In that harmony, patterns began to emerge, faint and mysterious. The first threads of reality wove themselves together, like strands of a song being composed. It was slow, deliberate, and filled with patience. The universe did not rush to be born, it savored its unfolding. Within each pulse of that early glow, possibilities intertwined, matter and light, time and distance, all swirling in embryonic grace. As the glow spread outward, the stillness observed. It held space for the newborn cosmos, neither interfering nor receding. Its presence was the foundation of peace beneath all creation. Every ripple of energy carried within it a memory of that peace, a resonance that would later echo in stars, in oceans, and even in the quiet between human breaths. The universe, from its first spark, was not just made of matter, it was made of calm. The gentle spark continued to expand, its song growing richer, deeper. It began to hum with structure, though none yet existed. Within its soft radiance, the blueprint of galaxies shimmered, waiting for their moment to awaken. The light had not yet separated from the darkness, but both were there, intertwined in perfect union. It was neither day nor night, neither presence nor absence, only becoming. The first quiet remained infinite, surrounding the spark in a vast embrace. It whispered softly to the new light, reminding it to move with grace, to grow with care. The spark listened, its rhythm steady, unfolding as if it knew that the universe's first steps should be taken slowly. Nothing hurried, everything simply was. The act of existing itself was enough to fill the void with meaning. And so, time continued its soft expansion. The fabric of space grew thin and wide, the glow spreading like a dream through boundless night. The spark, now stronger, began to hum with the power of creation. Yet, it never lost its gentleness. Each wave of energy carried the signature of that first quiet, that peace from which all things had come. Even now, across eons, that calm hum still lingers in the cosmic background, a whisper of the first silence. The first quiet was not a beginning but a transformation. It was the shift from unknowing to knowing, from absence to awareness. Within its calm, the universe found its first breath. The gentle spark became its heartbeat, pulsing softly through the eternity that followed. It was the moment existence chose to be, and in that choice, all of creation found its root. Even as the universe expanded and cooled, the memory of that first quiet endured. It rests still in every atom, every pulse of energy, every glimmering star. It is the hum behind all motion, the peace beneath all noise. And if one listens deeply enough in the silence of the night, or the stillness before sleep, one might still hear it, the echo of that first gentle spark, softly singing the birth of everything. From the tender fabric of the first glow, the universe continued to stretch, its warmth thinning but never fading. The silence that once held only one spark now held countless ripples of energy. The gentle hum that had once been a whisper became a cosmic lullaby, deep and slow, resonating through expanding space. Within that music, light began to find its rhythm, a soft, pulsing melody that shimmered like breath through an endless sea. This was the first song of light, not yet seen by any eyes, but already weaving its way into the bones of everything that would ever live. The early universe glowed in a quiet haze, not yet adorned with stars, only filled with pure, radiant warmth. Hydrogen and helium, the simplest of beings, floated freely, drifting like dream particles across an infant sky. They moved slowly at first, drawn together by the faint tug of gravity, a force still learning its own patience. Each encounter between these light elements was tender, a meeting of possibilities. The universe, vast and dim, waited for its first fire to bloom. As ages passed, clouds of gas thickened in silence. They gathered like sleeping giants, coiling gently within the fabric of space. Inside their veiled depths, pressure began to whisper against temperature, pushing, pulling, shaping. The universe was preparing for a transformation, the moment when light would no longer just drift, but burn. Within those deep clouds, the first stars began to form, their cores trembling with the promise of creation. When the first star ignited, it was not a violent roar but a serene awakening. Hydrogen atoms, crushed and embraced by gravity, fused together, birthing helium and releasing a wave of light so gentle yet powerful that it painted the dark with golden breath. That was light's first lullaby, sung softly into the void, its melody filling the emptiness that had waited so long to glow. The stars were the universe's first lanterns, each one a verse in the song of becoming. The light they cast did more than shine, it shaped. It gave time a rhythm and space a soul. From the depths of nothingness, a tapestry of illumination began to unfold, scattered with the glimmers of young suns. The darkness was no longer empty, it had become sacred, a cradle for brilliance. The stars pulsed like slow heartbeats, and with each beat, they whispered warmth into the cold fabric of expanding space. Each star became a workshop of wonder. Within their blazing cores, matter began to dance, fusing and reforming, turning simplicity into richness. Hydrogen became helium, and deeper still, helium became carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, new songs within the same eternal symphony. The stars were the universe's first artists, painting reality with the colors of chemistry, crafting the materials that would one day build worlds, oceans, and hearts. The lullaby of light continued to spread. It rippled through the vastness, echoing softly from one glowing sphere to another. The darkness between them hummed with gentle resonance, as if remembering the tone of that first spark. The stars, scattered across incomprehensible distances, were still connected, each one a note in a melody so wide that only the cosmos itself could hear it fully. Over time, some stars grew large and restless. Their hearts burned faster, hungrier, fusing heavier and heavier elements within their fiery cores. Iron began to form, and with it, the stars felt the end approaching. Yet, even in their final moments, they gave one last gift. When these great suns could no longer hold their weight, they folded in upon themselves, exploding outward in vast, breathtaking bursts, supernovae, the universe's most beautiful goodbyes. Those explosions scattered stardust across the sky, flinging gold, calcium, and iron into the waiting void. The universe's darkness shimmered as these particles spread tiny seeds that would one day form planets, mountains, and the marrow of life. Every atom of your body, every breath you take, was once forged in those radiant depths. Each heartbeat carries the echo of a star's last song. After the light of each supernova faded, the silence deepened again, but it was a changed silence. It was now filled with memory, with matter, with the quiet dust of possibilities. The universe no longer hummed only with energy, it hummed with stories, with the soft residue of creation. The song of light had become layered, complex, woven with both beginnings and endings. And in the wake of those stellar deaths, gravity gathered the scattered ashes. New clouds formed, denser than before, enriched by the elements born in fire. The lullaby continued in new tones, softer but richer. Stars gave birth to other stars, their light cascading through time like a mother's whisper passed from one generation to the next. The cosmos had learned to nurture itself, to create and recreate in endless cycles of luminous birth. Galaxies began to take shape, grand spirals, gentle ellipses, clusters of glimmering souls held together by unseen arms of gravity. The song of light deepened further, now sung in harmony by billions of stars. From afar, it was like a choir of radiant beings, each burning with purpose, each carrying within it the seeds of future worlds. The first lullaby had grown vast beyond imagining. And yet, even amidst that splendor, there remained a softness in the universe's rhythm. Light traveled endlessly, touching what it could, fading only to return in new forms. It wrapped itself around space like a shawl, keeping the cold from swallowing everything. The stars' glow became the language of comfort, of continuity, of presence in the immense stillness. The universe was learning to rest within its own vastness. As eons drifted by, new elements formed, cooled, and joined in ever more intricate dances. Dust swirled and gathered into disks, spiraling under gravity's patient pull. From these circles of stardust, planets began to emerge, solid, steady children of the stars. The lullaby of light now found new surfaces to kiss, reflecting, scattering, and shimmering upon worlds that had never known warmth before. Each world that formed was a quiet echo of a star's love, a piece of memory made tangible. On some, light would linger softly, on others, it would blaze and fade. Yet all were connected, born from the same stellar song. The universe had begun to write stories upon itself, each planet a page, each beam of starlight a sentence flowing through time. And through it all, the music of light persisted. Even where no stars shone, where darkness stretched unbroken, the faint afterglow of those first fires lingered like the scent of warmth after a candle goes out. That ancient radiance, the cosmic background, still hums today, whispering of the time when light first learned to sing. In that steady hum, one can almost hear the universe breathing. It is slow, vast, and peaceful, carrying the pulse of stars long gone. Every flicker of light in the night sky is not just a point of brilliance, it's a memory, a voice from billions of years ago, still echoing its lullaby across eternity. The elements the stars had crafted continued their quiet journey. They gathered in new hearts of fire, merged into new generations of suns, and wove new songs. Each iteration of light learned from the one before, glowing not just for beauty but for the making of life itself. The universe had found its rhythm, a cycle of light giving way to matter, and matter giving birth to light again. Even now, the song continues. The stars, ancient and young, still hum their verses into the night. They do not sing for an audience, they sing because it is their nature to shine. Each flicker is an act of remembrance, each ray of light a bridge between what was and what will be. In their endless birth and fading, the universe finds both motion and rest. The lullaby of light is eternal. It comforts the expanding dark, fills the empty spaces with warmth, and reminds all things that even endings are beginnings in disguise. The stars beget the elements beget life, and life, in turn, looks up at the stars, listening, remembering, and adding its own quiet verse to the song that began so long ago, when the first light breathed softly into being. After the long songs of stars and their bright farewells, the universe began to settle into a new kind of calm. The scattered dust of their glorious endings floated through the widening dark, shimmering faintly as it drifted, patient as eternity. Each grain of stardust carried the memory of fire, the echo of fusion's heartbeat. They gathered slowly, drawn together by invisible threads of gravity, swirling into soft clouds that filled the silence like breath in the chest of the cosmos. These were the nebulae, cradles of new beginnings born from ancient endings. The nebulae did not rush, they drifted, vast and gentle, like watercolor spilled across an endless canvas. Within them, light and shadow played quiet games, soft radiance gliding through veils of dust. The gases, hydrogen, helium, carbon, oxygen, mingled in graceful turbulence, their movements slow as thought, their purpose ancient and patient. Each swirl, each collision, carried the faint promise of becoming something more. The cosmos was learning again how to gather, how to hold itself close in luminous fog. As eons unfolded, gravity continued its tender work, pulling the clouds tighter, weaving them into great luminous arms. Some clouds stretched for light years, their edges glowing as starlight seeped through from distant suns. Within their hearts, regions of higher density began to form, tiny ripples in an ocean of gas. These ripples were the seeds of worlds yet to be. The nebula's quiet dance was the universe's slow inhale before creation exhaled again in the form of new stars and systems. The colors of the nebulae shimmered with life unseen. Hydrogen glowed a soft crimson, oxygen whispered in blues and greens, sulfur in gold and rose. These hues were not painted but born, light meeting matter, energy finding form. The universe was an artist now, its brush made of radiation, its strokes vast and patient. Each nebula was a mural, a story written in the language of light and gas. The stillness of space became a gallery of becoming. Within the heart of one such cloud, dust began to spiral tighter, gravity's invisible hand guiding it into motion. The particles brushed against each other, clinging softly, growing heavier, denser. Heat gathered in the center, a gentle spark of warmth within the cold expanse. Slowly, the dance of dust became a slow, radiant heartbeat, the birth of a new star hidden within layers of starlit mist. The nebula was both womb and guardian, wrapping its forming child in a luminous embrace. Around these young stars, the remaining dust swirled into disks, great, thin halos of matter, circling like ripples around a drop of light. Within these disks, collisions became creation. Dust met dust, spark met spark, and the first stones of worlds began to form. What had once been scattered ash from ancient suns now gathered into the foundations of mountains, oceans, and living skies. The nebula, once ethereal and aimless, had become a nursery for destiny. Time within a nebula flowed differently, slow, vast, unhurried. 1,000 millennia could pass as a single sigh of motion. The universe did not count such ages, it only listened to their rhythm. Within the glowing fog, stars blinked awake like soft eyes, their light diffused by the mist that still surrounded them. They whispered to one another through the darkness, their radiance weaving connections that would one day stretch into constellations. The stardust within these clouds was sacred. Each atom had been born in a star, carried across the void by the breath of explosions, then cooled in the quiet of space. Within those particles, carbon and oxygen waited, the seeds of breath and life. They drifted gently, suspended between creation and remembrance, as though aware that they carried within them the blueprint of futures not yet imagined. The nebula held these dreams like a mother holds her sleeping children, softly, protectively, endlessly. As stars continued to form, their light began to push back the mist. Photons brushed aside particles, sculpting the nebula into shapes both haunting and tender, pillars, arches, filaments stretching across eternity. Each curve of the gas told of motion and patience, of energy balanced in grace. The universe sculpted with light and time, its hands invisible but its art eternal. And in this cosmic ballet, each glowing cloud seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in serene rhythm. Not all of the nebulae glowed, some were dark, hiding their treasures within. These were the silent ones, where dust was thick enough to swallow starlight whole. Yet even there, creation thrived unseen. In the invisible depths, the quiet hum of matter becoming form persisted, like a lullaby heard only by the stars themselves. These dark nebulae were the secret chambers of the cosmos, where the next chapter of light prepared itself in silence. Sometimes, the clouds collided. When two nebulae met, their gases intertwined in slow, magnificent spirals, triggering new waves of starbirth. The energy of their meeting rippled through the void, sending cascades of light and motion outward. It was not chaos but choreography, gravity's own slow waltz. From these meetings, clusters of stars emerged, shining together like families born from the same gentle storm. As more stars formed, their light illuminated their birthplaces, revealing the structure of their cosmic wombs. Dust trails stretched like rivers through space, glowing softly against the infinite dark. Nebulae like the Orion or the Eagle would someday reveal these wonders to future eyes. Worlds yet unborn would look back and see the places where their matter once drifted free. The universe, though vast beyond measure, remembered its beginnings in every grain of dust. The interplay between starlight and shadow became poetry in motion. Light carved paths through the clouds, illuminating edges, revealing soft wisps that curled like breath. The darkness between these beams was not emptiness but potential, each pocket a seed for new stars, new stories. The nebula's slow embrace was a dance of contrasts, of radiant beginnings and veiled mysteries, forever intertwined. And as light sculpted, shadow deepened. The balance of creation held steady. No star was born without the quiet patience of dust, no illumination without the darkness that shaped it. This harmony was the foundation upon which all future beauty would stand. In the quiet rhythm of expansion and collapse, the universe learned that even light needed stillness to be understood. Gradually, as more stars emerged, the clouds began to thin. The soft embrace of the nebula loosened, its materials spent, its purpose fulfilled. Yet it did not vanish, it transformed. The dust that remained would drift again, merging into new formations, finding new stars to cradle. Nothing was wasted, nothing truly ended. The nebula's slow surrender was simply another verse in the endless song of becoming. From a distance, these nebulae gleamed like memories suspended in time. Their shapes, pillars, veils, tendrils, were like echoes of the stars that once formed within them. They stood as reminders of the gentle persistence of creation, of how beauty arises not from haste but from timeless patience. The universe painted itself softly, layer upon layer, until wonder became inevitable. Even now, scattered across the galaxies, new nebulae bloom. Each one is a reminder that creation is continuous, that dust never forgets its purpose. What once burned becomes the clay of new beginnings, what once ended becomes the breath of something unimagined. Within each glowing mist, the same quiet song plays, the melody of stardust returning home. The light from these clouds travels across billions of years, reaching eyes that will never touch them, minds that will only dream their warmth. Yet even across that impossible distance, something of their peace endures. To gaze upon a nebula is to look into the slow heartbeat of the cosmos, to witness the calm artistry of existence itself. In their serene motion, nebulae teach the universe its gentlest truth, that everything is connected by patience, by the long waiting between spark and form. Stars, dust, worlds, and beings all arise from the same slow breath of creation. The nebula's embrace is both a beginning and a return, the universe folding softly into its own luminous reflection. As the last mists of a nebula disperse, its legacy continues within the stars it bore. Those stars will, in time, create new dust, new clouds, and the cycle will begin again. The universe does not tire of this endless rhythm, it sings it like a lullaby, each repetition softer, deeper, more beautiful. Creation, in its slowest moments, reveals its most tender form. The nebula's story is not one of chaos but of care. It is the tale of dust that remembers where it came from and where it will go. It is the patient weaving of elements, the gentle gathering of light and matter into the shapes that define all things. Its beauty lies in its stillness, its purpose in its quiet unfolding. The universe, through it, whispers one enduring promise: from every ending, something luminous will always rise. And so the clouds of stardust continue their slow embrace, drifting through the endless night, glowing faintly with memory and hope. Each whisper thread in the grand tapestry of becoming, each shimmer a quiet vow to begin again. The nebula does not hurry, for it knows that creation's truest grace lies not in speed but in surrender, in allowing time to sculpt, light to guide, and stillness to hold. Deep within the collapsing folds of the nebula, where gravity had gathered the last scattered grains of dust, a single core began to glow. What had once been no more than drifting ash from ancient stars now pulsed with quiet heat. Hydrogen pressed against hydrogen, and the weight of the universe seemed to fold inward, holding its breath. Then, from the stillness, light bloomed once more, not in explosion, but in awakening. The young star opened its eyes for the first time, and the darkness bowed before its tender, golden whisper. Around this infant sun, the remnants of the nebula still swirled, circling in gentle spirals. Gas and dust formed a halo, a luminous ring of potential, shimmering like powdered light. The star's warmth began to caress the inner edges of this disk, pushing, stirring, sculpting. Each wisp of material responded with slow elegance, drifting into graceful paths. The newborn sun did not shout its presence into the cosmos, it breathed softly, and its breath became the foundation of a new world. At first, its glow was faint, trembling like a candle learning to steady itself against the void. But with each passing eon, fusion deepened its voice. The young sun hummed with growing confidence, a gentle vibration that radiated across billions of miles. Its light became music, guiding dust and gas into order. In the calm after chaos, A balance began to take shape: light and gravity, warmth and motion, all moving together in a rhythm older than time. The particles circling the star were restless, yet faithful to its pull. They collided, clung, and began to form clusters, tiny bodies of rock and ice, no bigger than whispers in the cosmic wind. Gravity drew them together, spinning them into larger forms, each one carrying the memory of the star's birth. The disk became a great wheel of becoming, its edges shimmering with the possibility of worlds. Within this ring, the first outlines of planets began to take shape. The young sun's radiance guided them gently. Its light streamed through the swirling fog, cutting bright corridors into the haze. The inner regions grew warm, the outer regions cold, each realm finding its own destiny. Dust near the heart of the light fused into stone and metal. Farther out, ice and vapor gathered into massive spheres. The architecture of a solar system was being written in silence, with light as the author and time as its ink. As the star grew stronger, the winds of its energy began to flow outward. These solar winds, gentle yet persistent, swept through the surrounding cloud, clearing paths, carving space for the young planets to breathe. The once dense disk thinned, revealing the brilliance of the star's face. It was still small compared to the giants it would someday join in the galaxy's dance, but its light carried purpose, as if it already knew it was meant to nurture life. The warmth of this young sun reached far, touching the icy boundaries of its cradle. The golden waves of radiation spread like gentle ripples across a cosmic pond, awakening the dust that still drifted beyond the reach of gravity's grasp. In that glow, even the coldest particles stirred faintly, reflecting back flecks of light, a promise that every piece of matter, no matter how small, still belonged to the story unfolding here. Within its heart, the young sun burned with quiet devotion. Hydrogen became helium in endless, silent fusion, a process as delicate as it was powerful. The balance between pressure and gravity held perfectly, a fragile truce maintained by the star's own will to exist. If the universe could listen closely enough, it would hear that balance as a hum, an unending, soothing tone that vibrated through space like a lullaby. The young star did not burn alone. Around it, neighboring suns, born from the same ancient nebula, glowed faintly in the distance, their light weaving invisible threads across the night. They were siblings, bound by origin and separation, their luminous songs blending into a single cosmic chorus. The galaxy was a cradle of stars, each one finding its own rhythm, each one whispering softly into the vast quiet. As time deepened, the star's presence became steady, no longer a flicker but a flame. Its surface rippled with waves of light, vast storms of plasma curling and collapsing in beautiful rhythm. To any observer who might someday look upon it, the sight would be both fierce and tender, the mark of a being fully awake in its purpose. The young sun was no longer becoming, it simply was, radiant and serene, the heart of a new cosmic family. The light it gave was generous but never hurried. It touched everything equally, the forming rocks, the drifting gas, the icy fragments at the edge of its reach. Each beam carried warmth and story, binding the growing system into unity. The young planets, still molten and unsteady, responded to its pull, spinning faster, smoothing their orbits as if lulled by the rhythm of their parents' glow. Solar flares flitted across its surface like breaths of color, each one casting shimmering arcs into the void. These bursts of energy were both wild and beautiful, expressions of a vitality that could not be contained. Yet even in their ferocity, there was harmony. The star was learning how to balance power and peace, how to burn without breaking. It had found its steady pulse in the music of the cosmos. Far beyond, comets began to form from the remnants of ice and dust, silent travelers carrying the star's story outward. They glided to the far reaches of the system, tracing long, slow orbits that would someday bring them back, carrying whispers from the edge of creation. Each one a messenger, each one a memory frozen in motion. The young sun watched over them, its light marking their distant paths. The surrounding space grew clearer, the fog of the nebula dissolving into transparency. The star's full radiance could now flow freely, casting golden arcs through the dark. Its light reached unbroken into the void, where it would travel for ages, perhaps to brush the faces of other worlds, other eyes. The young sun's whisper had become a voice, a calm, eternal note sung into the heart of existence. Within its glow, The planets continued to shape themselves. Crusts cooled, atmospheres thickened, magnetic fields began to hum. The system was alive now, a symphony of orbits and rotations all guided by the steady pull of the star. Its gravity held them close, but not too close, each body given the freedom to spin, to drift, to dance in its own rhythm. Balance, once again, was the quiet rule of creation. In the stillness of space, the young sun's light flickered gently off the dust that remained. What once was chaos had become order, what once was shadow had become song. The glow of the star reached into every corner, filling its domain with a sense of gentle certainty. The universe, for a fleeting moment, seemed to pause and listen to its light, a small, warm sound in an otherwise endless quiet. Through eons, the young star would continue to burn, steady and faithful. Its energy, born from the first fires of the cosmos, would nurture the orbits it had shaped. Around it, the whispers of forming worlds began to echo, a hint of rivers yet to flow, skies yet to breathe. The star, though unaware, was already preparing a home for things that would someday look up and wonder. Even in its infancy, it carried within it the wisdom of all stars before it. Every pulse of light it gave was built from the remnants of suns long gone, each photon a relic of the universe's oldest dreams. It did not create alone, it continued the chain, one voice in a lineage of illumination. The song of creation flowed through it, timeless and true. From its surface to its farthest ray, the young sun shimmered with purpose. It was not just fire, it was continuity, the bridge between past and future, between dust and consciousness. It burned with devotion to the idea that even in the vast loneliness of space, warmth could exist. Its light was not only energy, it was care, extended endlessly outward into the waiting dark. As time wore on, the sun's gravity gathered the last of its companions, the asteroids, the small bodies of rock that would wander between the worlds. Together, they formed the finishing strokes of a grand celestial painting. The once chaotic nebula had become harmony, the once scattered dust a song of orbit and light. The young star had fulfilled its first purpose, to bring order to what was unshaped. And though its story was only beginning, the star already radiated a wisdom that seemed older than time itself. It did not need to know its destiny, its presence was enough. To exist was its gift, to give light was its nature. The universe had whispered it into being, and it had answered not with noise, but with calm radiance, the quiet of power balanced by grace. In its warmth, space found a new center. The planets, still cooling, turned gently in their orbits, the dust continued to thin, and the young sun pulsed on, untroubled, serene. Its whisper filled the vastness, weaving threads of light across the cosmic loom. The song it sang was not one of birth alone, but of promise of futures yet unseen, carried softly within every ray of its golden breath. And so, the young sun held its place in the vast design, neither hurried nor still. Around it, creation continued in perfect silence, each particle a listener to its radiant song. The universe, in its endless unfolding, had once again found a new rhythm, a whisper that would one day cradle oceans, skies, and living hearts, all born beneath the steady hum of this gentle star. In the soft shimmer of the newborn solar winds, the dust began to sway like delicate dancers in a cosmic ballet. Every grain, touched by light and stirred by faint magnetic breaths, moved in patterns both chaotic and harmonious. The sun, young and eager, stretched its radiant fingers outward, warming the cold particles that had wandered for ages in the dark. In this slow waltz of creation, matter found rhythm, and through that rhythm, purpose. The vast emptiness began to hum with the promise of worlds to come. The dust did not fall randomly, for invisible hands guided its every drift and spin. Gravity, the silent sculptor, drew the particles closer, coaxing them to meet, to merge, and to build. Each collision sparked warmth, a brief kiss of energy that whispered the story of beginnings. And as the rings of debris thickened, their glow deepened, a halo of promise encircling the star. The dance of dust had no audience but the void, yet it moved with grace as if the universe itself were watching. With time beyond counting, the grains grew restless. They found partners and clung to them, tiny unions of stone and ice, fragile and fleeting. Then they grew again, colliding, sticking, breaking, and joining anew. What began as motes of dust became pebbles, then boulders, and then swirling islands of rock and metal. The once thin ring thickened into a living canvas, a tapestry of orbiting matter tracing gentle spirals through light. From the smallest shimmer to the grandest swirl, every motion whispered of patience. Within those rings, turbulence brewed, a quiet chaos that was neither violent nor still. Jets of charged gas from the young sun sculpted eddies in the dust, carving ripples and gaps like strokes upon water. Each ripple hinted at something more, a hidden shape, a forming world, a future cradle of gravity. The debris began to sort itself by weight and size, the fine dust drifting outward, the heavier stones falling closer to the sun's warm hand. This dance of distribution was not random, it was choreography written by natural law. Every flicker of light revealed subtle patterns. Some rings shimmered faintly gold, where silicate dust caught sunlight, others glowed faint blue, where ice waited in the outer calm. The inner regions burned hotter, spinning faster, where metal and rock clashed like sparks from a forge. The outer zones drifted slower, gentler, where frost and shadow ruled. In that great gradient of light and cold, diversity was born, each ring a different nursery, each particle a different dream. Over eons, collisions became less chaotic and more deliberate, guided by gravity's tender insistence. Massive clumps formed embryos of worlds, turning slowly, pulling more dust toward them. The dance that began as scattered motion began to find rhythm, and the solar disk took on structure, order born from stillness, pattern born from chance. The music of formation grew quieter now, but deeper, more intentional. The cosmos was no longer just expanding, it was concentrating. Every forming worldlet within those dusty rings spun faster as it grew heavier. Some glowed faintly from the heat of their making, like small lanterns within fog. Others remained cool, building layer by layer, holding their warmth deep inside. In their slow revolutions, they drew in everything near them, their gravity sculpting trails and spirals through the glowing dust. They began to clear the space around them, like dancers claiming their place on the stage. Through the radiance of the young sun, the shapes of the first worlds began to reveal themselves, rough, imperfect, unsteady. They tumbled through the debris like newborns learning balance. Some collided violently, shattering into clouds of shards. Others endured, growing stronger from every impact. The dust, ever generous, fed them endlessly, wrapping their scars in new layers of promise. The story of creation was not one of instant beauty, but of persistence. Out near the edge of the glowing disk, ice became the artist. It gathered around small rocky cores, building shimmering shells of frozen light. These would one day drift in the darkness beyond the warmth of the inner rings, becoming the keepers of cold and memory. Farther in, molten worlds churned and spun, their faces bright and wild. The contrast between fire and frost gave the system texture, balance, and harmony. It was a cosmic symphony composed of extremes. In every fragment of rock that collided, there was a quiet echo of what came before, the stardust forged in forgotten suns, reborn now as builders of new homes. The atoms that once burned in supernovae now sought stillness in worlds yet unlit. It was a cycle endless and sacred, where destruction and creation wove together in silence. Each dust grain's journey, though small, was eternal. As the solar disk aged, its glow thinned. Much of the dust had vanished into larger bodies, into planets, moons, and scattered trails. What remained was fine mist, cosmic residue drifting softly like smoke after a long performance. Yet even this mist played a role, shaping atmospheres, feeding comets, dusting new horizons with the story of beginnings. Nothing was lost, only transformed. The sun, now calmer, watched over its creation with steady light. It no longer pulsed with the fierce rhythm of its youth but with the calm certainty of presence. Around it, the remaining dust shimmered faintly, like a final bow to the great performance of birth. The music of collisions quieted, replaced by the soft hum of orbiting worlds. In the silence that followed, the rings of dust became a memory etched in light, a record of how stillness birthed motion, and motion birthed meaning. The planets that emerged carried within them the fingerprints of that dance, their paths forever aligned to the music that once guided them. And though the dust was gone, its spirit lingered, woven into every orbit, every tide, every shimmer in the night sky. From those delicate swirls of dust came the first promise of solidity, the ground that would one day cradle oceans, life, and dreams. The soft materials of the cosmos became the foundations of existence. The patience of the universe, unmeasured and ancient, had sculpted permanence from the fleeting. Every grain of dust had been a seed, and now the garden had begun to grow. Even as new worlds found their orbits, the sun's light continued to nurture what it had summoned. The once violent energy softened, turning from forge to warmth. The planets cooled and settled, their surfaces forming stories of stone and ice. The dance that began in light's chaos now rested in balance, a harmony between gravity's pull and the sun's gentle push. There was still motion, still dust trailing through space, but the frenzy of birth had passed. What remained was quiet order, a cosmic lullaby echoing through the void. The sun's family had been born, planets, moons, and countless smaller companions, each holding a memory of the swirling dust that made them. In this newfound peace, comets formed in the distant cold, icy archives of the system's earliest moments. They would wander through the centuries, carrying whispers of the first dust, reminders of the time when everything was soft, bright, and becoming. They were messengers of origin, glowing softly whenever they came close to their maker's warmth. The dust, though gone from sight, was never forgotten. It lived on in every spark, every motion, every heartbeat of the solar system. Each world carried its legacy, from molten core to mountain peak. The quiet hum that once guided the grains still resonated in the pull of gravity, the balance of orbits, the rhythm of cosmic breath. And so, in the grand silence of space, the memory of that dust continued its slow dance unseen, unfelt, yet eternal. The planets turned, the comets drifted, and the sun glowed gently at the center, as if humming the same tune that began it all. The dance had not ended, it had simply changed partners. What had begun as dust became destiny, and the gentle rings that once shimmered with scattered light became the blueprint for existence. The stars beyond watched in still admiration, knowing that in this quiet dance, something wondrous had begun again. The dust had danced, and through that dance, the universe found another way to dream. The dust that once drifted freely now began to bind into something more. Within the soft rings that encircled the young sun, countless pebbles moved like quiet wanderers, tracing spirals through light and shadow. They brushed against one another with a gentleness that belied the power of their union. Each touch left a trace of warmth, a fragile bond of attraction that gravity began to nurture. Out of this endless ballet of collisions, something steady started to form, tiny companions finding solace in togetherness. No single pebble knew it was building a world. Their dance was slow, delicate, unplanned, yet governed by invisible laws older than stars. Some collided and shattered, others stuck, and those that remained intact grew by fractions, gaining weight with each quiet embrace. They rolled through the dusty plains of the protoplanetary disk like seeds in a celestial garden, gathering, spinning, and calling more matter toward them. From chaos, clusters began to bloom, small islands of order amid the cosmic sea. The disk itself shimmered like a vast mirror of potential, light glinting off the surfaces of countless stones. The smallest pieces clung to larger ones, drawn in by static charge and gentle gravitational whispers. Soon, the pebble clouds thickened, their centers pulling tighter, their edges swirling like fog caught in wind. They began to hum with the quiet energy of becoming, the first notes of planetary formation resonating through silence. In those dense pockets, the future took shape. As the pebbles gathered, the collisions grew stronger and more frequent. Each impact released bursts of heat, tiny flashes of creation that glowed briefly before fading into the darkness. The warmth helped the particles fuse, melting some surfaces together like soft clay under sunlight. They formed irregular shapes, lumpy, imperfect, but persistent. The fragile clusters hardened with time, becoming planetesimals, the first building blocks of worlds. What once floated aimlessly now carried intention. Through countless orbits, these planetesimals grew in both number and strength. Some drifted closer to the sun, where heat sculpted them into dense metallic cores. Others lingered farther out, where cold preserved their icy hearts. The young solar system had become a place of quiet construction, each piece contributing to a greater whole. Gravity, ever patient, guided their steps, ensuring every collision, every union, served a purpose. It was a slow creation, but deeply deliberate. As planetesimals formed, they began to influence one another. Their growing masses tugged gently at nearby particles, bending orbits, shaping the paths of others. Some merged in soft collisions, others ricocheted away, seeding distant regions with material. The once smooth disk was now a living landscape of movement, a slow storm of creation that filled the airless void with silent purpose. Every turn of their orbit was an echo of the sun's heartbeat. In the inner regions, where sunlight was strongest, the planetesimals were tough and rocky. They bore metallic veins and mineral bones, forged by the warmth that melted their surfaces and fused their hearts. These would become the seeds of terrestrial planets, strong, enduring, resilient. Farther from the sun's grasp, beyond the warmth, planetesimals grew differently, lighter, softer, cloaked in ice and dust. These distant travelers would one day give rise to gas giants and frozen worlds. Some planetesimals collided so violently that they shattered into fragments, scattering trails of debris behind them. Yet even this destruction fed the process, as broken pieces became the seeds for new unions. The system thrived on repetition, creation through collision, growth through loss. The universe, in its quiet wisdom, had found balance between chaos and order, between breaking and becoming. Nothing was wasted, only transformed. Over millions of years, the larger planetesimals began to dominate their regions. They swept up smaller pebbles, clearing paths through the dusty haze. Each became a miniature world, a world in the making, glowing faintly from the heat of its own gravity. The once flat disk now held structure, zones of clear space surrounded by faint belts of material. The cosmic nursery had matured, its children learning to claim their space in the grand design. At times, when two massive planetesimals collided, the result was spectacular, a fusion of force that melted their surfaces, welding them into larger bodies. These mergers created spheres that rotated slowly, their spins uneven and unpredictable. Some tilted, some rolled, some wobbled in silence. The marks of those collisions would remain written on their surfaces forever, craters, ridges, and valleys that told stories of ancient meetings in the void. The newborn planetesimals were not yet stable worlds, but they had mass, presence, and identity. Around them, smaller fragments continued to drift, feeding them like a slow rain of cosmic nourishment. Each impact deepened their character, adding layers of history and complexity. Inside their cores, heat built up from the energy of countless collisions, slowly melting their interiors. The first hints of differentiation began, metals sinking inward, rock rising outward. With gravity's pull growing stronger, the planetesimals began to shape the very environment that created them. Their orbits disturbed the dust, creating gaps and waves within the disk. Some drew in material from vast distances, while others lost what they had gained to passing neighbors. It was a delicate dance of exchange, a story of give and take that echoed through the whole system. From these early interactions, the blueprint for future planets began to emerge. The light from the sun played across their rough surfaces, glinting off frozen plains and rocky peaks. Shadows stretched long across their curves, marking the first outlines of worlds. Though they were still small compared to what they would become, their presence brought depth to the emptiness. The once flat disk was now a sculpture, textured and alive, shaped by both chance and design. Each planetesimal carried within it the promise of a greater destiny. Time, though meaningless to the stones themselves, became the quiet rhythm of transformation. The collisions slowed, becoming rarer but more significant. Those that occurred now were monumental, shaping entire regions with their power. The dust between the growing bodies began to thin, revealing clearer paths, more defined orbits. The system was becoming organized, shedding its chaotic youth. It was the universe's version of growing up. In the outer reaches, far from the sun's warmth, icy planetesimals gathered in clusters. They orbited lazily, preserving ancient materials untouched by heat. These would one day become the comets and frozen moons, time capsules holding the memory of the first light. Their stillness was sacred, a record of creation's earliest notes, preserved in crystalline silence. Meanwhile, in the warmer zones, rocky planetesimals collided and merged into protoplanets. They grew large enough to shape their surroundings, sweeping clean their orbits. Some captured moons, others lost pieces of themselves in fierce impacts. The solar system had entered a phase of magnificent growth, each collision birthing something new, each impact refining what already was. The balance between order and chaos remained delicate. Too much violence could scatter material back into dust, too little motion could halt creation. Yet the system endured, finding harmony through motion itself. Gravity, ever the patient composer, kept the rhythm steady. It did not rush, for it knew that worlds born too fast would crumble, while those born in stillness would last. The heat within some of these growing worlds began to stir activity, molten cores churned, surfaces cracked, and geysers of vapor rose into the dark. The first whispers of geology began, long before any atmosphere, long before any life. The stones were waking up, learning to breathe in their own way. The silent beauty of formation was now a living process. Every planetesimal carried a legacy of the stars. The metals within them were born in supernovae. The ices had drifted from ancient clouds. Their coming together was not just the creation of planets, it was the recycling of existence itself. What once burned as light now lay quietly as stone, waiting to rise again in another form. Creation, it seemed, was not invention, but remembrance. The sun, ever watching, continued to guide the process. Its light pushed the finest dust outward while its gravity held the greater bodies close. It was a tender balance between repulsion and embrace, a metaphor for all of existence. Around it, the planetesimals spun in devotion, each tracing a path of gratitude through the glowing dust. Eventually, some of these planetesimals grew so large that their pull altered the very rhythm of the disk. Their influence shaped currents of gas and stone, dictating where smaller objects could form. These early giants became shepherds of creation, keeping the balance between order and ruin. Their presence would ensure that some paths remained clear, allowing future worlds to grow in peace. By now, the dust that once drifted freely was nearly gone, either consumed or expelled. What remained was structure, form, and quiet stability. The stage that had been filled with chaos and collision was now populated by growing worlds, each following its ordained orbit. The sun's family was beginning to take shape, their bonds defined by gravity's eternal patience. In the fading mist, the story of the pebbles lingered. Their journey from tiny wanderers to mighty builders was written in every mountain and valley that would one day rise. The universe had shown that even the smallest pieces, given time and tenderness, could become worlds. From dust and pebble came purpose, from motion came memory. And though no eye yet watched, the scene was beautiful, a ballet of beginnings, a harmony of collisions, a quiet triumph of time. The pebbles had found each other, not by chance, but by the unspoken rhythm that guides all creation. In their unity, they had become something far greater than themselves, the seeds of worlds, the echoes of eternity made solid. In the heart of the young solar system, amid the slow swirl of light and shadow, a small region began to stir with promise. Here, within the golden haze of dust and debris, one planetesimal started to outgrow the rest. It was not a sudden rise, nor a violent conquest, but a patient gathering, a steady pull that drew fragments of rock and metal inward. The forming earth began as a whisper, not a roar, her gravity like a gentle breath coaxing companions closer. From countless pebbles and broken stones, she began to take shape, cradled by the sun's distant warmth. Each piece that drifted toward her brought both energy and memory. When they collided, they did not merely merge, they shared stories written in starlight. The impacts released flashes of heat, moments of brilliance that melted the surface, letting the young planet's body grow fluid and alive. For millions of years, this process repeated endlessly, a cosmic heartbeat pounding beneath the silence of space. Every fall of a rock, every flicker of dust, was a note in the song of creation, a song that Earth learned by touch and fire. As her mass grew, so did her influence. The forming Earth became a gravitational anchor, sweeping her path clean of smaller bodies. What once was a chaotic field of drifting matter became a region of calm around her presence. Yet peace was not easily won, each collision tested her form, reshaping her surface, deepening her heat. The glow from her molten skin shimmered faintly through the darkness, casting soft light across the remaining debris. The planet was still fragile, yet her pulse grew stronger with every new arrival. In the early chaos, she was not alone. Other bodies grew nearby, companions and rivals in the same dance of formation. Some orbited peacefully at a distance, others strayed too close, meeting fiery ends upon her surface. Every impact carved new scars, melted new layers, and built her gravity a little higher. This was not destruction, it was growth by surrender, a lesson the universe repeated through every act of creation. The young Earth did not resist the chaos, she embraced it, using each strike as a step toward becoming whole. The heat of accretion began to transform her from within. As the bombardments continued, her inner regions grew molten and heavy. Elements sank toward her core. Iron and nickel gathered in her center, forming a metallic heart that would one day hum with magnetic life. Around this core, lighter silicates floated upward, giving rise to a rocky mantle. What had begun as a shapeless mass of dust was now a layered world, a planet learning structure through pain and persistence. The forming Earth glowed faintly red, wrapped in vapor and haze. Her surface churned like liquid stone, restless and bright. The collisions still came, though fewer now, each one smaller but still transformative. The skies above her were thick with drifting dust, and her newborn gravity pulled it all inward. She was not yet solid, but she was becoming whole, a glowing ember of future stability. Every moment of her existence was an act of patience, an offering to the slow hand of time. In this era of constant creation, fragments continued to fall from every direction. Some arrived as icy wanderers from the outer regions, carrying water and organic molecules locked in frozen shells. They struck the molten Earth and vaporized instantly, their materials mingling with the gases that surrounded her. Others brought rare metals and minerals, seeds that would later give rise to mountains, oceans, and life. The planet was collecting not only mass but memory, the ingredients of her future beauty. With each rotation, the young Earth grew heavier, her gravity deepening, her presence undeniable. She began to affect the orbits of nearby planetesimals, pulling some into her embrace, pushing others aside. Her growing mass radiated heat into the void, the glow of creation spreading faintly into the surrounding space. The light she gave off was not her own, but borrowed from the energy of every impact, every union, every transformation. Her story was written in light that came from motion itself. The surface was a restless ocean of magma, swirling in slow tides of heat. Mountains rose and fell in minutes, only to be swallowed by molten rivers that flowed without end. Yet beneath the chaos, structure was forming, a balance between energy and rest, between birth and destruction. The young Earth's rotation steadied, her form became more spherical, her gravity more even. In the midst of fire, she was finding symmetry. As the bombardment slowed, the planet's outer layers began to cool. A thin crust formed, fragile and cracked, but it was the first step toward solidity. The glowing seas beneath continued to move, pushing and folding this early skin from below. The surface still shuddered with impacts, but now it began to retain their memory. Each crater, each fissure, was a mark of endurance. Slowly, the fiery glow faded to a deep crimson, then to darkness. The Earth had taken her first breath of stillness. But peace was fleeting. A massive body, perhaps the size of Mars, wandered too close, a final visitor in the age of collisions. The impact that followed was beyond imagining, a fusion of force so great it reshaped the planet entirely. Molten rock splashed into space, forming a ring that glowed like liquid light around her. The Earth's body was nearly torn apart, yet from that devastation, something wondrous was born: the Moon, her eternal companion, shaped from her very being. After the great impact, Earth spun faster, her day reduced to a few short hours. The molten seas boiled, her surface renewed by fire. But time, ever patient, began its healing work. The debris that circled her coalesced, forming the Moon that would one day calm her tides and slow her spin. What seemed like ruin was instead balance returning, a reminder that creation often hides within destruction's shadow. With the major impacts behind her, Earth entered a quieter phase of growth. Her surface cooled enough to form solid ground, though volcanoes still roared and fissures bled molten stone. Gases released from her depths thickened around her, forming a dense atmosphere of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and steam. Lightning crackled across the skies, igniting clouds of gas into brief, glowing storms. The planet had found its voice not through silence, but through soundless flashes of power. The molten interior still churned, and the iron heart deep within began to spin independently. This motion generated a magnetic field, an invisible shield that reached far into space. The field deflected charged particles from the sun, shaping a protective cocoon around the planet. Though fragile and young, this shield would become vital for the life that would one day emerge. The Earth was not only solidifying, it was learning to protect itself. Rain fell for the first time when the atmosphere cooled. Steam condensed into droplets that hissed against the still warm crust. For ages it rained without pause, water filling every crack and hollow. Oceans began to form, shallow at first, but growing deeper with time. They reflected the faint light of the newborn moon, shimmering with silver ripples under dark skies. In those early waters lay the quiet promise of life yet unborn. The planet's surface continued to reshape itself through internal motion. Vast plates of rock drifted slowly atop the molten mantle, colliding and pulling apart. The foundations of continents were laid in those shifting movements. Volcanoes exhaled the last of the planet's early gases, replenishing the sky after each eruption. The air thickened, the seas deepened, and the Earth grew calmer in her rhythm. The patient pull of gravity had given way to the patient pulse of evolution. Though she had cooled on the surface, her interior still burned with the memory of creation. The molten core continued to churn, driving magnetic forces that shielded her from the sun's fierce winds. The mantle's slow movements kept her surface alive, recycling rock and releasing heat. Earth had learned endurance through flow, a delicate balance between stillness and motion that would sustain her for billions of years. As she matured, her orbit stabilized. The sun's light no longer scorched her too fiercely, nor left her in darkness for too long. The moon, in turn, began to tug at her oceans, creating tides that moved with rhythmic grace. The planet had found balance, a dance of forces that kept her in gentle motion. The same gravity that once brought chaos now gave her poise. Every atom that composed her had been forged in ancient stars, yet now they rested together, bound by her gravity into something entirely new. She was a collection of memories, a convergence of time and matter, a child of explosions turned into calm. The chaos that once defined her had softened into rhythm. The fires had become warmth, the collisions had become shape. The world was still barren, but she carried everything she needed for the next chapter. Metals, minerals, water, air, all in delicate balance, awaiting the spark of life. The journey from dust to planet had been long, violent, and patient. And now, in her quiet turning beneath the sun, the Earth began to listen to the wind she had made, to the waves she had gathered, to the silence that surrounded her. The young Earth glowed faintly blue beneath her clouds of steam, her oceans reflecting the first hints of sky. From above, she must have looked like a gem alive with motion, wrapped in mist, spinning slowly in the blackness. She was no longer a fragment or a furnace, but a complete being, breathing in her new identity. The patient pull of gravity had crafted her, and time had blessed her with grace. Still, the universe was not done with her. Comets continued to fall, carrying water and carbon from the outer reaches. Each one delivered gifts, icy fragments that enriched her oceans and skies. Their impacts were gentler now, more like soft knocks on a door that was ready to open. The planet absorbed each gift quietly, expanding her potential for life with every strike. The crust thickened, the atmosphere grew stable, and the molten glow beneath the surface dimmed to a steady warmth. Earth had settled into herself, no longer fragile, no longer chaotic. Her story had moved from survival to serenity. What had begun in fire now rested in balance. The accretion was over, but the creation had only just begun. And so, in the silence after chaos, the Earth turned slowly under her new sky. The memory of every collision still lived within her heart, the fire in her core, the metals in her mountains, the water in her seas. She was not merely formed, she was remembered. From dust to stone, from pebble to planet, she had grown not by haste but by patience. The universe had taught her the art of waiting. The patient pull that had once drawn her together now held her steady in orbit, cradled between sun and moon. Every movement, every tide, every whisper of wind echoed that same lesson, that creation is not loud, not sudden, but endlessly deliberate. The growing earth had found her rhythm, her voice, her peace. And in that stillness, the seeds of life waited to stir. The earth was young then, still red and raw, its surface molten and restless under the pressure of its own formation. Around it circled fragments of stone and dust, remnants of a solar nursery still untidy from its birth. Among these fragments, one world drew close, a wandering sphere not much smaller than the earth itself. The two danced a brief and furious waltz, their paths entwined by the invisible hands of gravity, until at last, they met in a collision both violent and strangely creative. The impact shattered skies and melted worlds. Mountains vaporized, oceans that were not yet born turned to steam before they could dream of falling. The intruding world, later named Theia, merged with Earth's body, giving it new weight, new spin, and from the molten spray of that cataclysm, something miraculous began to form. A ring of molten rock, glowing like a halo, circled the scarred planet, swirling in patterns of fiery dust. From that luminous ring, the moon began her slow birth. Each particle, once wandering alone, now found companions to cling to. Gravity whispered to them, a patient lullaby that drew them together, pulling scattered matter into a single growing body. Time stretched, and what had been chaos took shape, a sphere of light reflected in the new planet's dark skies. The newborn moon cooled more quickly than her mother. Her face, once molten and wild, began to settle under the touch of darkness. Craters marked her skin like memories of birth pains, while Earth's glow painted her horizons in shades of blue and gold. Together, they began to spin, locked in an eternal rhythm that still hums through the tides today. In those first quiet nights, if night could exist yet, the moon hung closer than now, vast and brilliant, dominating the sky. It pulled at the oceans that were beginning to gather, stirring them before life had even arrived. The earth, still trembling from its own creation, began to calm under that rhythm, a cosmic heartbeat of rise and retreat, ebb and flow. The moon's gravity became Earth's companion in balance. Without it, our planet might have spun too fast, its axis tilting wildly in cosmic winds. But the moon steadied her, a silent guardian holding the planet's breath steady, keeping her tilt gentle, her seasons possible. From that tender tug-of-war, stability was born, and with it, the conditions that would one day cradle life. Even as molten rivers still ran across the Earth, the moon continued to retreat, inch by inch, her orbit widening with each million years. She was moving away, but never gone, a loyal witness to everything her collision had made possible. The Earth's skies, once filled with flaming debris, began to clear, revealing her pale companion glowing like a lantern in the cosmic dark. The bond between Earth and Moon was more than gravity, it was history woven into the elements themselves. Fragments of Theia still live within our mantle, whispering of that long-ago impact. The Moon, too, carries pieces of Earth's lost surface, frozen in her crust, holding our planet's earliest stories in her dust. Sometimes, when the moon's light touches the sea, it's as if the two remember. The pull of the tides feels like an old embrace, the echo of that first meeting, gentle now after eons of distance. The oceans rise and fall as though Earth still sighs in her sleep, responding to her distant twin's slow orbit through the heavens. And so, what began as destruction became a partnership, a dance that has lasted billions of years. The moon softens our nights, guides our waters, and anchors the rhythm of time itself. Her arrival was born from fire, but her presence brings calm, the quiet breath after the storm. In the moon's pale glow, the earth found a mirror, a companion that reflected her light even when the sun turned away. Through that reflection, darkness was never absolute. The moon became a symbol of patience, of cycles and return, of time's slow hand tracing the same paths again and again. Each crater on her surface holds the memory of cosmic dust, the steady rain of space that never stops falling. Yet despite the scars, her face shines unchanged, serene, maternal, reminding all who gaze upon her that beauty often grows from chaos, and peace from fire. As the eons passed, the earth cooled further, her crust hardening beneath ancient storms. Volcanic breaths filled the air, and the first whispers of atmosphere began to cling around her. The moon looked down upon her still young sibling, reflecting sunlight into the growing blue haze, helping to steady the warmth and rhythm that life would someday need. The Earth's rotation slowed, drawn by the moon's pull, her days stretching longer, her nights deeper. This gradual taming shaped everything: the weather, the oceans, even the pulse of future creatures. Without that slowing, the Earth might have remained wild beyond life's reach, a restless planet spinning too fast to ever rest. In those days of molten rock and restless skies, the moon was a constant, the first calendar, the first watcher. She marked the passing of ages long before humans could count. Every ripple of her light over the forming seas became part of the rhythm that would one day guide tides, migrations, and dreams. The heat of that great collision gave birth not just to two worlds, but to their shared destiny. Earth and moon became bound by an invisible thread of mutual shaping, each defining the other's nature, each transforming through their connection. It was gravity's love story, told across silence and time. Even now, billions of years later, that story continues. The moon still drifts away, so slowly we barely notice. She carries with her the echo of that first embrace, the warmth of a planet's molten heart still faintly glowing in her memory. And the Earth, in turn, carries her mark forever in her tides and tilt. When we gaze at the moon today, we see not just a satellite but the echo of our own beginnings, the bright scar of our creation, turned into a source of peace. The same gentle light that calmed the newborn Earth now softens our nights, tracing the boundaries between dream and memory. Sometimes, in the hush of evening, when the moon hangs full and low, it's easy to imagine her whispering across the distance, a reminder that even from destruction, something tender can rise. That silence can heal the fiercest flame, and that even in the vastness of space, companionship endures. The Earth turns beneath that silver glow, steady and rhythmic, her oceans swaying to the moon's slow call. Together, they continue their ancient dance, bound by invisible grace, watched over by the same stars that once witnessed their fiery birth. It is not a story of ending, but of gentle continuation, the quiet pulse of creation that still hums between two celestial hearts. And as time stretches onward, the moon's soft pull will keep shaping our world, guiding tides, marking seasons, inspiring dreams. The kiss that birthed her may have been fierce, but its echo is tender, a lullaby of gravity, distance, and light that still sings across the night sky. The young Earth was still trembling from the colossal impact that had birthed the moon. Its skin was torn and raw, a surface of endless flame and liquid stone. Everywhere, glowing rivers of magma flowed like blood beneath a red, churning sky. No ocean of water yet existed, only an ocean of fire, stretching from horizon to horizon, a restless sea that never cooled. The planet spun faster then, its days only a few hours long, and each rotation stirred the molten surface like a slow cosmic stir of chaos and creation. The air itself was poison, thick with vaporized rock and iron, wrapped in clouds of silicate mist that glowed faintly with the heat below. Lightning danced endlessly across the haze, striking into molten plains with silent ferocity. From the edge of this infernal horizon, mountains rose and fell like waves frozen mid-crest, their peaks collapsing under the unbearable weight of heat. The Earth was still soft, pliable, a body in formation, its surface shifting like muscle under a newborn skin. Everywhere, the world breathed fire. Volcanic vents opened and closed in rhythmic bursts, spilling molten fountains that cooled into brief crusts before melting again. In that endless churn, elements began to sort themselves. Iron and nickel sank inward, pulled by gravity's heavy hand, while lighter materials floated toward the surface. In those early moments, the Earth was building its bones, its metallic heart settling at the center, its rocky layers slowly forming like the crust of a cooling ember. Though no eye existed to see it, the sight would have been otherworldly, a sphere alive with motion, a glowing wound healing itself through heat. The surface boiled and swirled like liquid sunlight, reflecting the birth pains of a planet still deciding what it would become. Each eruption was a breath, each quake a pulse, and deep within, the core began to spin with a silent rhythm that would one day cradle the magnetic shield protecting all future life. The heat came not only from the surface but from the inside out. The Earth's formation had trapped enormous energy, compressed into its growing core. Radioactive decay within its minerals added new fire, ensuring the molten ocean endured. For millions of years, the world was caught between solidifying and melting, its skin forever breaking open under the weight of its own fever. The rain, when it came, was not yet water. Steam rose from the molten seas in towering clouds, cooling as it reached the heights of the atmosphere, only to condense and fall again. Droplets of stone turned to ash before ever touching the ground. This cycle repeated endlessly, a false rain, a mimicry of the water that would one day fall in life-giving form. For now, every drop was claimed by fire before it could rest. As the molten ocean churned, the planet's rotation began to slow, tugged by the moon's constant pull. Each day stretched longer, and with that slowness came small mercies of cooling. Crust began to form, not yet stable, but stronger than before. Islands of solid rock floated briefly upon the magma, like fragile rafts in a sea of flame, only to sink again when cracks opened and swallowed them whole. Still, even within the chaos, order was quietly being written. Minerals combined and separated, sorting themselves through temperature and density. The first primitive crusts carried the ingredients of continents yet unborn. Deep inside, the iron core solidified further, spinning faster, creating the invisible magnetic cocoon that would one day protect the world from the sun's rage. The skies glowed orange and crimson, painted with the hues of vaporized minerals. In the distance, great pillars of smoke rose where magma burst through newly formed cracks, creating temporary mountains that hissed and melted in the same breath. Every few moments, entire regions liquefied again, their forms swallowed by the molten tide that refused to rest. From the edge of space, the Earth would have looked like a glowing lantern, a sphere wrapped in amber light, its surface alive with motion. The young moon, orbiting close, watched her siblings' restlessness in silence, her pale body reflecting the red fires of a planet in transformation. Their bond deepened with every passing turn, the moon's pull gently slowing Earth's spin, allowing the fires below to breathe. Amid the heat and roar, the Earth began to find balance. Pockets of molten rock cooled into the earliest stable crusts, forming darker patches upon the fiery expanse. These regions became the seeds of continents, fragments that would grow and drift across billions of years. Though still surrounded by infernal seas, these first solid places marked the planet's slow transition from pure chaos to possibility. Inside, the pressure was immense. The molten mantle convected in slow, vast currents, carrying heat upward and rock downward in an eternal cycle. This motion gave the Earth its first sense of motion beneath the surface, the early hints of tectonic activity that would one day raise mountains and shape oceans. In the depths, the Earth was learning to move, to breathe, to change. As time stretched onward, the fiery surface dimmed little by little. Volcanic eruptions still tore through the crust, but now the planet had moments of calm between storms. These pauses allowed minerals to crystallize, forming the first real stones, zircons, tiny and enduring, holding memories of heat within their atomic lattice. They were the first storytellers, silent witnesses to the planet's molten youth. Eventually, water returned, not yet in oceans, but in vapor. Comets and icy bodies bombarded the Earth, delivering frozen water that vaporized on impact, thickening the atmosphere with steam. The sky became a cauldron of storms, lightning weaving through endless clouds, as the world's surface slowly cooled beneath the weight of its new breath. Each drop of rain that finally survived the descent marked a turning point. Slowly, cautiously, the fire began to yield. Crust thickened, magma withdrew into deeper chambers, and the glow faded from red to black. The molten ocean was giving way to a new kind, one that would shimmer with reflection instead of flame. But beneath the cooling shell, fire remained, eternal, pulsing deep within the Earth's heart. Even as the surface darkened, volcanoes continued to roar, releasing gases that would form the early atmosphere: carbon dioxide, nitrogen, sulfur, and traces of water vapor. Though hostile to life, these gases became the raw ingredients for all breath that would follow. The fires of youth were not cruel, they were creative, forging the chemistry of everything to come. The Earth's crust thickened unevenly, cracking and drifting atop a still molten sea. The first tectonic plates were born, sliding and colliding in slow, grinding dances. These movements released yet more heat, shaping the continents to be and defining the planet's restless spirit. In these endless transformations, Earth found her rhythm, a cycle of destruction and renewal that continues to this day. As the fire retreated, darkness fell for the first time, true night, where stars could be seen through thinning clouds. The moon, hanging close, illuminated the smoldering lands below. Its reflection shimmered faintly on the glowing crust, a soft white contrast to the deep, fading red. For the first time, the Earth knew shadow and calm, brief, but real. In the cooling air, chemical reactions began that could never have happened in the old, molten world. The crust trapped gases, minerals reacted, and crystals formed, marking the dawn of geochemical balance. The fiery chaos had laid the foundation for complexity, and soon, under the rain that would eventually fall for centuries, life's ingredients would stir. Yet even now, the molten heart below did not sleep. It remained a slow, pulsing memory of creation, a reminder that the Earth was born of heat, and that all her life would depend on that warmth. The mantle's convection would one day drive continents, renew soils, and fuel volcanoes, the breath of the planet, hidden beneath stone. The glow of the molten ocean dimmed to a memory, but its fingerprints endured. Every mountain, every ocean basin, every grain of sand carries its legacy. The iron core forged in that fire still shields us, and the minerals born from the ancient lava now lie quiet beneath our feet, holding the planet's first memories in silence. When the first real rain finally fell, cold, heavy, unbroken, it hissed upon the still warm rock, filling cracks and carving rivers. Steam rose into the air, softening the planet's face. The ocean of fire had run its course, giving way to the ocean of water, but without its fevered touch, there would have been no crust, no sky, no life waiting to form. And so, the Earth emerged from her molten bath, transformed, tempered, balanced, and quietly glowing beneath her new skin. The fire that once consumed her now slept within, a constant, steady pulse that would last for billions of years. Above her, the moon kept watch, silver and calm, as the world began to cool enough to dream. In that long exhale after fire, silence descended. The Earth, for the first time, began to rest. Yet deep inside, her molten heart whispered softly, promising motion, creation, and renewal. For though the ocean of fire had calmed, its spirit still flowed beneath, the eternal ember at the center of a living world. At last, the fire began to ease. The Earth, after endless eons of molten fury, exhaled a long breath into the dark. Her glow, once visible across the young solar system, dimmed to a deeper red, her molten seas retreating beneath growing islands of stone. The planet that had burned like a star now softened, its fever breaking. Thin sheets of rock, fragile and shimmering, floated upon the remaining magma, cooling in delicate ripples like skin forming over a healing wound. Above, the skies still churned with thick clouds of steam and volcanic gas, their underbellies glowing faintly from the world's inner fire. Lightning flickered between the layers, each strike echoing across the vast silence. The Earth's breath was heavy, slow, but her rhythm had changed. The chaos had begun to organize itself into patterns, the slow churn of crustal plates, the quiet solidification of oceans not yet born, and the first long moments of planetary peace. As the surface cooled, a crust began to form with intent. Silicate minerals crystallized and interlocked, creating the first solid continents to be. These plates were restless, thin as an eggshell, but they marked the beginning of structure, a stability the world had never known. Beneath them, the mantle's fire still flowed, pressing upward in soft waves, sculpting mountains that collapsed as quickly as they rose. It was a planet teaching itself how to hold form. The moon, now orbiting farther away, watched with quiet patience. Its soft pull still shaped the tides of molten rock, drawing the crust's thin layers upward and down, helping the surface to mix and breathe. Through this subtle dance, the Earth's body became balanced, the spin slower, the rhythm steadier. The moon's gravity soothed what chaos had left behind, turning fire's violence into a lullaby of motion. In this hush of cooling, steam began to fall as rain. 4. Thousands of years, it poured without pause, not yet the gentle rain of later ages, but torrents that hissed upon the hot rock, cracking it open and filling the fissures with boiling water. The sound was endless, a whisper of change written in vapor and thunder. The first rivers did not flow but steamed, carving early scars into the crust as they evaporated upon contact. Yet through repetition, the stone learned to bear it. The crust thickened. Volcanic eruptions still roared, but between them stretched long periods of calm. Each eruption brought minerals from the deep, painting the surface with new textures. Basaltic plains spread like dark glass across the land, cooling into hexagonal fractures, silent proofs that the earth was learning patience. And as these plains solidified, they began to capture the memory of every storm that passed above them. The atmosphere, once a furnace of vaporized rock, softened as well. Carbon dioxide and nitrogen began to dominate, and water vapor turned to clouds that traveled slower and gentler than before. The colors of the sky shifted from crimson to ochre to faint gray-blue. For the first time, light could scatter softly instead of burning straight through. The sky was becoming translucent, a veil rather than a wall. Beneath this new light, the crust cracked and folded under its own weight. Where the plates met, molten rock leaked upward in slow fountains, creating ridges that cooled to black. The Earth's surface became a mosaic, patchwork plates drifting over the mantle's slow fire. In these seams of creation, minerals mixed and transformed, the foundations of geology taking their first steps toward complexity. Rain continued to fall. Each drop cooled the surface more deeply, locking in the planet's heat below while softening her exterior. Over time, depressions filled and merged, creating shallow pools that shimmered with steam. The first protooceans were forming, not yet blue or pure, but rich with dissolved minerals, heavy and warm. These pools reflected the faint sunlight filtering through the mist, painting the world with a quiet golden sheen. The mountains that rose from volcanic upheavals now held their shape longer before eroding. Crust had become confident enough to endure. Wind, newly born from temperature gradients, swept over the surface, carrying dust from one region to another. The land, once glowing with fire, now shimmered in darker tones, browns, blacks, and grays replacing the reds of molten stone. The cooling was not just physical, it was emotional, as if the earth herself were learning rest. Below the crust, the mantle moved like a slow breath. Convection currents carried heat toward the surface, ensuring the planet would remain alive inside even as its exterior grew quiet. This gentle exchange between inside and out gave rise to the cycle that would shape the future, the endless renewal of crust through time. Cooling did not mean stillness, it meant rhythm. Thunder still rolled, but now it echoed across landscapes that could carry sound. Each clap bounced off forming cliffs and valleys, resonating through the thick air like the heartbeat of the young world. Between storms, calm settled, a silence so deep it seemed to hum. The earth was beginning to hold space for stillness, something it had never done before. In these silences, the temperature dropped enough for clouds to linger and for mist to form over the newly cooled plains. The air, dense and mineral-rich, carried the scent of stone and metal. It was the breath of a planet exhaling creation, the smell of beginnings hardening into permanence. Above it all, the sun rose dimly through the haze, its light filtered and soft, not yet warm, but steady. The crust now bore scars of its early life, cracks from cooling, fractures from tension, patterns that told of expansion and contraction. These would become the blueprints for continents, the first outlines of what would one day be the face of the world. Each fault line was a quiet promise: movement will come again, life will follow. Deep beneath the hardening surface, the molten core spun faster, wrapping the planet in a protective magnetic field. This invisible armor deflected the solar winds that once stripped the skies bare. Now, particles that would have scoured the atmosphere were turned away, allowing gases to remain. The cooling crust, protected by this unseen guardian, became a stable cradle for everything that would come next. As the days lengthened, sunlight began to pierce through thinner layers of atmosphere. Shadows appeared on the ground for the first time, flickering across the uneven terrain. The world knew light and darkness, heat and cool, contrast was being born. The rhythm of time began to take its recognizable shape: day and night, expansion and rest. Everywhere, minerals interacted with rainwater, dissolving, binding, transforming. This slow chemistry laid the groundwork for oceans rich in nutrients, the eventual soup of creation. Though life was still far away, its ingredients were already dancing unseen, patient, waiting for the world to cool just a little more. The crust was not merely forming land, it was forming the stage for existence. The once red horizon now glowed faintly gold. The Earth's fever had subsided, replaced by a warm hum. Volcanoes still breathed, but their eruptions no longer swallowed continents. Instead, they fed the soil of the future. The world's violence had turned creative. The cooling hush had arrived not as silence, but as a deep, slow rhythm of endurance. The young oceans continued to spread, their warmth giving rise to endless storms. But each storm left behind something lasting: new minerals, new mixtures, new paths for rivers to follow. The crust began to recycle itself, subducting and reforming, ensuring that nothing on the planet would ever stay still for long. This was the birth of Earth's memory, the beginning of her continuous rewriting. Above the clouds, the stars finally shone without distortion. The moon cast her silver glow across the forming seas, shimmering upon ripples that caught her light like liquid mirrors. The Earth's reflection danced back into the heavens, announcing her transformation, from flame to form, from chaos to calm. In the cooling hush, even time seemed to slow. What had once been rapid and violent now stretched into patience. Rocks took centuries to shift, rivers ages to carve their paths. The pace of creation had softened, as though the universe itself were pausing to rest in the stillness it had made. And through it all, the Earth's heart continued to beat below. Molten currents whispered through the mantle, their heat the echo of ancient fire. It was a reminder that calm was not the absence of energy, but its balance. The planet had not gone cold, it had simply learned how to hold its warmth more gently. Now, the rain fell cooler, clearer. The vapor that once scorched now nourished. Pools grew into basins, basins into oceans. The crust thickened into continents, solid and sure. The surface, once glowing with unbearable heat, now shimmered with reflection. The Earth had become a mirror to the cosmos, no longer a torch. The hush was deep, but not lifeless. Within the new stillness, reactions continued quietly, molecules forming, breaking, and reforming in the warm shallows. The stage was being prepared for something unprecedented. The crust's cooling had given the planet more than stability. It had given it time, the most precious resource of all. With every passing million years, the air grew gentler, the oceans deeper, and the land firmer. The world was no longer a raw flame, but a breathing, balanced being. It held within it the pulse of creation and the promise of continuity. The cooling hush had not ended the story, it had merely opened the chapter where life would begin to whisper. And so, under the moon's watchful light, the Earth finally rested in her new skin. The molten memories beneath her crust still stirred, but softly now, like dreams beneath sleep. The world was ready to listen to the quiet forming of rivers, the slow rise of continents, and the faint, coming sound of life. The hush of cooling was not silence, it was the sound of waiting. In the quiet aftermath of molten fury, the Earth began to exhale. Gases trapped deep within her core rose like long-held sighs, drifting into the cooling void above. Steam hissed from cracks, sulfur whispered from vents, and carbon dioxide mingled with nitrogen in a swirling veil. It was not yet the air of breathing creatures, but a rough draft of sky, a hazy promise forming from the planet's tender wounds, gathering weight, and learning how to linger instead of escape. The early sky was not blue but copper and violet, painted by minerals that shimmered in the rising light. Volcanic plumes spiraled high, curling like smoke from a sleeping giant's nostrils. The sun, dimmed by a veil of haze, cast a faint orange warmth that touched the trembling surface. Beneath, oceans of molten rock cooled to hard stone, exhaling steam in endless sighs that thickened the new world's breath. The first whispers of an atmosphere began to circle, fragile yet persistent. Lightning flickered through the thick clouds, igniting streaks of pale fire across the heavens. Every flash forged new compounds, rearranging elements into more complex forms. Nitrogen met oxygen, carbon found hydrogen, and water vapor fell again and again as rain, the planet's first rhythm, a soft percussion over cooling crust. These storms were long and heavy, like a lullaby for a restless world finding its breath between thunderclaps. As days turned to ages, the heavy gases began to settle into layers. Carbon dioxide blanketed the Earth like a warm quilt, keeping her from freezing in the sun's distant gaze. Methane danced lightly above, while nitrogen held steady, loyal and constant. Slowly, The balance of sky took shape, fragile yet firm. The air thickened enough to hold clouds, soft, luminous veils that drifted across the infant planet's brow. In this young sky, the first rains fell for centuries, filling cracks, smoothing stone, and carving the first valleys. Rivers began their long song downward, whispering secrets of movement and time. The waters cooled the crust and wrapped the world in mist, blurring the line between sea and sky. From this gentle confusion, a partnership formed. The earth below and the air above began to weave a shared breath. Volcanoes continued their deep conversation with the heavens, exhaling gas after gas into the thickening shroud. Each eruption added to the fabric of air, carbon, sulfur, hydrogen, and nitrogen finding new patterns. Over time, the angry plumes softened, trading chaos for rhythm. The planet's breath grew steadier, like a heart learning its beat after birth, no longer frantic, but deliberate and calm. Then came the quiet cooling of oceans. Steam that once screamed upward began to condense into clouds that drifted gently instead of bursting. Rain fell not in violence but in peace, feeding rivers that ran silver beneath a pale, dim Sunday. The once red sky turned grey-blue, dimly luminous, as water vapor reigned supreme. The earth began to shimmer under this tender new sky, a breathing, living sphere wrapped in calm. Amid this calm, new wonders brewed. Lightning still danced, but its strikes no longer met barren stone. They now found shallow pools rich with chemistry, creating sparks that played with molecules. The air above and the water below began to mirror one another, each lending something to the other: warmth, moisture, charge, and breath. Creation itself lingered in this union. Carbon dioxide, heavy and thick, began to yield to transformation. The oceans absorbed it greedily, turning it into carbonates that settled on their floors. Slowly, the sky's burden lightened, and nitrogen became the reigning breath. The air grew gentler, no longer choking, no longer fiery. It was a long, patient evolution, one that took millions of soft exhalations to form a single, stable rhythm. The color of the heavens changed again. As volcanic smoke faded and clouds began to thin, the sun finally found its way through in pure light. Blue scattered across the upper air, faint at first, then deeper, until the sky began to look familiar. The first dawns that broke over those ancient lands were gentle and pure, light dancing off young seas, refracted by a true atmosphere for the first time. In that light, mist hovered like silk over valleys and plains. The air was not yet clean enough for life, but it was learning balance, learning stillness. Winds began to form, slow and wandering, pushing clouds from one horizon to another. The earth, once silent, now hummed softly with the movement of air and water, the first breath of weather. Over time, lightning's dance became the teacher of life. Within the moist air, molecules joined in secret, simple, uncertain beginnings of what would someday think, move, and dream. The air, unknowingly, became a cradle, its breath a promise of what was to come. The balance of nitrogen, water, and light became a gentle preparation, the soft inhalation before creation's song. The days grew calmer as the earth's heartbeat steadied. Volcanic fury subsided into quiet murmurs beneath the crust, and the storms of smoke and fire turned to silver rains and winds. The sky, once heavy with rage, now floated with grace. It no longer hid the sun but embraced it, scattering its warmth evenly across seas and stone. The young world finally knew what it meant to breathe in rhythm. In this rhythm, the air began to cool the oceans further, and the oceans began to calm the air. They spoke in cycles: evaporation, condensation, rainfall, a sacred loop that carried life's secret pattern. The sky's tears became rivers, the rivers became clouds, and clouds, returning, kissed the land again. Thus began the endless dialogue between earth and sky, one of trust and eternal exchange. Even in the silence of space, Earth's exhalations shimmered, a thin blue halo seen from afar. It was her signature, her mark of transformation. Within that fragile band of gases, all the potential for life hid in quiet balance. No single gust or molecule knew its purpose yet, but together they held the promise of something miraculous waiting to unfold. As centuries deepened into eons, the air grew patient and strong. Nitrogen's calm steadiness, carbon's warmth, oxygen's shy beginnings all danced in delicate proportion. The sky was no longer a raw experiment but a breathing companion, wrapping the earth in comfort. Every breeze that touched the ground was now a caress, not a storm. The sun's rays, once harsh and unfiltered, now found themselves softened by the veil of air. They kissed the ground gently, nurturing rather than burning. In this softened light, mists formed over seas and valleys, and the first glimmers of life's ingredients danced invisibly through the air, carbon compounds rising, drifting, falling back as rain. Each droplet that fell carried a little more wisdom from the sky, gathering salts, minerals, and whispers of carbon. The air and sea were teaching one another how to make complexity, how to turn stillness into potential. Their conversation was long and wordless, filled with patience and curiosity. Sometimes, the winds would rise, testing their new strength. They would sweep across oceans, carrying vapor and scent, mixing the world's edges together. This motion, unseen, unstoppable, would one day spread pollen, shape weather, and guide the flight of birds. But for now, it was only practice, only the first breath of movement. In the cool evenings, when the rains paused and clouds drifted aside, the heavens revealed their ancient memory, stars glimmering faintly through the blue. They were the same stars that had given Earth her atoms, distant kin watching the young planet learn to breathe. The air shimmered faintly beneath their gaze, proud yet humble, aware of its fragile beauty. When dawn returned, the first true mornings of Earth had begun. The atmosphere was no longer a shield of chaos but a cradle of calm. Each sunrise deepened the color of the sky, each breeze shaped the story of the planet's becoming. The Earth had exhaled her fire and inhaled her sky, and in doing so, prepared the stage for the tender pulse of life to begin. And so, in the hush between molten rage and awakening song, the Earth rested beneath her new sky, wrapped in air, cooled by rain, and whispered to by wind. Her first breaths had formed the fabric of balance itself, teaching that from stillness comes strength, from chaos comes calm. Above her, the heavens waited, patient and blue, ready to witness the next great sigh, the beginning of life. The rain began softly, like a heartbeat returning after a long silence. Drop by drop, the newborn sky released its weight, falling onto the still warm crust below. Each raindrop carried the memory of volcanic breath, the whisper of clouds, and the cool promise of balance. They fell endlessly, merging into rivulets that cut through rock and dust, carving tiny pathways where none had been. It was the planet's first act of comfort, a soothing, slow weeping that would last for millions of years. Steam rose in silver veils where the rain met heat, creating ghostly dances across the dark plains. The Earth exhaled into this meeting, cooling bit by bit, allowing the rain to linger longer each time. These endless showers were more than weather, they were the shaping hands of time itself. The planet's scars softened under this gentle touch, and what had once been fire began to glisten with reflection. As the rains continued, lowlands filled, forming shimmering pools that joined into basins. The water gathered minerals from stone and carried them along, creating a quiet chemistry in motion. Slowly, these waters found one another, merging into seas that trembled under the faint pull of gravity and wind. The first oceans were not yet calm, they hissed, steamed, and churned, but within their turbulence, peace was being born. The air grew heavier with moisture, the sky a constant grey veil, and the sun a diffused lantern behind mist. But below, the sound of falling water was constant, a melody of renewal. Each droplet's fall marked time, measured patience, and reminded the young Earth of its transformation. Through the endless rhythm of rainfall, the chaos of creation began to settle into the serenity of cycles. The first oceans spread like soft blankets, covering jagged crust and burying the rawness of the planet's youth. They stretched, connected, and formed a single body of shimmering depth that wrapped around the sphere. The Earth, once a world of fire, now gleamed blue and silver, her face softened by water's tender persistence. It was the first reflection of calm, the beginning of beauty itself. Beneath these young seas, minerals dissolved and mingled, creating rich brews of potential. Iron, sulfur, carbon, and phosphorus danced together, forming clouds of microscopic wonder. The waves above murmured, stirred by the breath of wind, while deep below, the planet's warmth continued to pulse through fissures. This meeting of cold and heat, light and dark, became the quiet forge of life's distant promise. The rains did not cease for centuries. They fell through lightning and mist, through night and shadow. Every droplet was part of the planet's great memory, carrying lessons from stone to sea. Over time, the waters became calmer, heavier, more stable. The roaring downpours turned to steady drizzles, then to occasional weeping. The world's first weather found its rhythm, and balance began to hum. As the rains softened, clouds thinned, and the first glimpses of blue returned to the heavens. Light reflected from the vast oceans, scattering radiance in every direction. From afar, the planet began to glow, a soft sapphire shimmer drifting through the void. The universe, silent and ancient, watched as Earth became the first to mirror the calm of the stars. The seas, endless and deep, began to whisper to the winds. Waves rose and fell with grace, teaching the atmosphere the art of motion. Breezes formed, sweeping across the water's surface, sculpting ripples that caught sunlight in silver flashes. For the first time, sound truly traveled, the sigh of waves, the hum of rain, the endless song of movement. Within the depths, something remarkable was unfolding. Energy from beneath the crust met the minerals carried by rain, and in this mingling, complexity stirred. Molecules began to arrange themselves in new ways, clinging together like shy companions in the dark. The oceans were more than water now. They were a cradle, a mindless but intentional pulse of chemistry, patient, waiting. The rhythm of evaporation and return grew steady. The sun warmed the seas, drawing vapor upward, while the sky gathered clouds to weep again. This cycle was the planet's first heartbeat, not of blood, but of breath and water. It kept time without ticking, carried memory without thought. The Earth had found her pulse in the rising and falling of rain. The oceans grew vaster, finding new depths as the crust settled and fractured. Continents began to lift their shoulders from the waves, giving shape to the first landscapes. But most of the world still slept beneath the water's blanket. There, in silence, minerals continued their dance. Each tide, each drop, was a brushstroke in the planet's painting of peace. As the centuries passed, rain no longer came as fury but as comfort. It cleaned the air, cooled the crust, and nourished the forming seas. The sound of rainfall became the planet's lullaby, gentle, repetitive, infinite. Even when lightning flashed or thunder rolled, there was serenity beneath it, a knowing that this storm, too, belonged to the pattern. The oceans began to mirror the heavens more clearly. On still days, their surface captured the stars, creating a reflection that blurred the line between sky and sea. The Earth was learning symmetry: above, endless depth of stars; below, endless depth of water. Both infinite, both quiet, both alive with unseen fire. Slowly, salts accumulated within the waters, born from dissolving rocks and mineral veins. These salts would one day shape life itself, but for now, they gave weight and texture to the sea. The water thickened with purpose, its currents growing more defined, its whispers more articulate. The oceans were no longer passive, they were becoming storytellers. Sometimes the rain would pause, leaving the world under pale sunlight. Mist would rise from the seas and drift inland, covering the land in shimmering veils. These moments felt sacred, as if the earth were sighing after a long conversation with the sky. The air smelled of minerals and warmth, the scent of beginning, pure and endless. In those pauses, the seas reflected every hue of the newborn day: copper in dawn, silver in noon, violet in dusk. The colors were messages from the sky, translated by water into song. Each wave's crest shimmered with intention, carrying energy across time. The earth had learned the art of motion, and with it, the poetry of calm. The rain returned again and again, teaching patience through repetition. Every drop carried minerals from highlands to depths, shaping landscapes, feeding valleys. Water became the architect of form, the sculptor of softness. Even the hardest stone surrendered to its gentle persistence, eroded not by force but by endless care. The deep ocean vents, glowing with volcanic fire, released warmth into the darkness. Around them, minerals gathered, and strange molecules began to cling and twist. They did not yet live, but they shimmered with the premonition of life, tiny echoes of what was to come. The oceans, in their endless patience, were dreaming. Above, lightning still stitched light into clouds, releasing energy into the air and sea. The combination of spark and salt, heat and rain, created possibilities too complex for chaos. Each bolt left invisible fingerprints on the world below, small gifts of creation, scattered in silence. The Earth's lullaby was both storm and calm, destruction and making. In the growing peace, winds began to shape waves into patterns. They rolled like breath across the surface, each crest following another in slow rhythm. This endless flow became the planet's meditation, always moving, never hurried. The oceans, vast and alive, carried the memory of every raindrop that had ever fallen. Sometimes, meteors passed through the sky, burning into nothing. Some fell into the seas, adding new minerals, new whispers of the cosmos. The Earth welcomed them, letting their stardust dissolve into her depths. Thus the oceans became a meeting of two infinities, the heavens above and the planet below, united in water. The rain no longer needed to be constant, it had done its work. Clouds came and went like thoughts, their rhythm soft and sure. Rivers carved paths back to the sea, learning the way home. The planet was at peace with its cycles now, exhalation and return, evaporation and rain. The harmony was unbroken. In this balance, beauty deepened. The blue of the oceans darkened, the shimmer of waves grew smoother, the horizon found its line. When sunlight broke through the clouds, it turned the waters to gold. The Earth's face had become a mirror for light, her once fiery skin now tender and reflective, cooled by the gentle patience of rain. Beneath the waves, silent mountains formed ridges and valleys, vast and hidden. They gave structure to the deep, guiding currents, shaping tides. The seas were no longer flat chaos, they were organized, pulsing with purpose. In their vastness lay mystery, and in their mystery, the quiet preparation for what would soon awaken. Every storm that formed now felt like remembrance, not anger. The thunder echoed softly across the endless waters, reminding the world of its molten youth. But each flash of lightning now seemed gentler, illuminating rain that fell not to destroy but to nurture. The Earth's story had turned from fire to flow, from chaos to care. In the soft quiet after storm, the world glowed under faint sunlight. Steam rose like sighs from the surface, drifting toward the stars. The oceans rippled gently, reflecting pinks and golds from the dawn. The rain had finished its long symphony of creation, and in its final notes, the Earth found serenity. Now, wherever a drop of water touched the surface, there was memory of the first rains, the endless falls, the patient shaping. The oceans held it all, the storms, the minerals, the silence. They became the keepers of time, storing the dreams of Earth within their depths. The world had become calm, wrapped in blue, waiting for the next breath, the birth of life itself. Beneath the blue hush of newborn oceans, the Earth began to stir again, not with fire this time, but with a slow, deep movement. The crust that had once been liquid and restless now floated upon molten depths, shifting and sighing. Pieces of rock, light and buoyant, began to gather and thicken, rising subtly above the waves. These were the first outlines of continents, unsure and trembling, forming the bones of land in a world still ruled by sea. At first, they were nothing more than fragments, islands of stone adrift in an endless blue. Waves crashed upon their sharp edges, smoothing their faces into gentler curves. Rain continued its work, dissolving minerals and carrying them back into the depths, while winds traced patterns across their barren surfaces. The meeting of water and rock became a slow conversation, one that would last forever, each shaping the other in patient, rhythmic exchange. Deep below, the mantle churned in fiery silence. Heat sought release, and where it pushed upward, rock softened and broke, forming new land. Where it cooled, the crust thickened, becoming the foundation of continents. These vast plates drifted upon molten seas of magma, their movements too slow to see but powerful enough to sculpt the planet's fate. Earth was no longer still, she was learning how to move gracefully. The first continents were small, scattered like stepping stones across the surface of the ocean. They rose and sank with time, their edges worn smooth by waves that never slept. Yet with each cycle, they grew stronger, layered by volcanic ash and hardened sediments. The Earth was layering herself, building memory upon memory, each grain of sand a whisper of time's passing. Volcanoes stood upon these early lands, their plumes dark against the pale sky. They spat ash into the wind, feeding the soil that formed in their wake. Every eruption added new minerals, painting the ground in strange colors: ochre, crimson, gray. Though lifeless, the land carried a strange pulse, as if waiting for footsteps that had not yet come. The earth was composing herself, line by line, in rock and rhythm. The oceans continued their dance around the new continents, curling waves against the young shores. Tides began to form, guided by the pull of the moon, the same moon born from Earth's own ancient wound. Water rose and fell, tracing invisible lines across coasts, etching patience into the land. This rhythm between sea and stone became the heartbeat of the planet, a timeless pulse of approach and retreat. Erosion became the quiet sculptor of the world. Rivers carried silt from mountains to sea, smoothing jagged peaks and building deltas where land and water met. Each droplet of rain that fell upon stone began a journey, a slow descent toward the ocean, carving valleys, feeding lakes, shaping the earth into form. What had been chaos became grace, the art of movement without haste. As the continents thickened, they began to hold heat differently from the sea. Days grew warmer on the rocky ground, nights cooler, creating winds that moved with purpose. Air flowed from sea to land and back again, completing the planet's great circulation. Earth had learned how to breathe in cycles, her atmosphere, her water, her stone, all bound in a shared rhythm of exchange. Lightning flashed over mountain ridges, illuminating barren plains where no life yet stirred. The rain that followed pooled into shallow basins, creating lakes that shimmered under the dim sun. Minerals leached into the water, forming new alchemies in stillness. These lakes were mirrors, holding both sky and stone in reflection, as if the world were learning to look at itself for the first time. Beneath the seas, continents continued to drift, colliding in slow embraces that reshaped everything. When two met, mountains were born, great wrinkles rising where the crust folded and pressed. Their peaks reached toward the heavens, still glowing from the planet's inner heat. From above, the Earth's surface began to resemble a sleeping body, oceans like breath, mountains like bones, valleys like veins. Wind found its song upon these peaks, echoing across ridges and through valleys. It carried dust and stone fragments, softening even the hardest cliffs. In this ceaseless motion, the planet's first symphony grew more complex. No longer just the sound of waves or rain, it was now joined by the whisper of wind, the sigh of stone, the murmur of rivers, all blending into a deep, eternal harmony. Where water met land, new chemistry thrived. Minerals mingled with sunlight and warmth, creating complex reactions along the rocky shores. The tides, ever patient, drew these elements together again and again, churning them in their gentle rhythm. It was here, in this boundary between sea and continent, that the faintest hints of life's first stirrings began, invisible but profound, written into every ripple. The continents themselves were restless wanderers, moving with the slow certainty of continents' drift. Over millions of years, they collided and separated, tearing open seas and sealing others shut. In their movement, they shaped the climate, sculpted coastlines, and guided the patterns of wind and water. This slow dance was the planet's deep choreography, unseen yet unending. As the land rose higher, rivers carved deeper. Canyons formed where water cut through ancient stone, revealing the memory of ages within each layer. The Earth began to show her history in strata, each band. A story of fire, flood, or calm. The continents were no longer just land, they were archives, holding the memory of creation within their bones. Volcanoes continued to hum beneath the crust, their warmth seeping upward. In the shallows of the sea, this heat met minerals and stirred them into motion. Bubbles rose through clear waters, carrying whispers from the mantle below. The ocean floor shimmered faintly with light from hydrothermal vents, a quiet glow in the darkness, a sign that energy still pulsed deep within the Earth's heart. Above, rain continued its patient descent, shaping, cooling, nurturing. The clouds drifted lazily over land and sea, carrying moisture from one to the other, linking every part of the planet into a single breath. The Earth had found its rhythm now, a conversation between water, wind, and stone, all endlessly cycling in harmony. In this balance, new colors appeared upon the continents. Minerals reacted with air and moisture, staining rock in shades of rust and jade. The world began to look alive, even before life had taken form. Each sunrise brought light that danced differently across the land, golden, gentle, and ancient, reflecting the subtle pulse of time itself. The first erosion-born sediments gathered at the edges of seas, layering into beds of silt and sand. With time and pressure, these became sedimentary rock, holding the fingerprints of rain and tide. The continents grew stronger, older, wiser. They were no longer fleeting islands but grounded presences, patient and enduring. Sometimes the land trembled as the plates beneath it shifted. Earthquakes rippled across plains and shattered cliffs, reminding the planet that her stillness was only an illusion. Even in calm, she moved. Even in silence, she changed. This balance between creation and collapse became her nature, the steady, rhythmic breath of geology. The mountains, ever eroded, fed the seas with minerals that would one day nurture life. Every grain of sand carried the story of a mountain's fall, a testament to time's gentleness and power. The oceans, in turn, shaped the coasts, smoothing rough edges, teaching land how to yield without breaking. Each was student and teacher to the other. The moon's pull continued to guide the tides, stretching and soothing the seas. With every rise and fall, coastlines were redrawn, new inlets carved, new sands laid down. The continents began to breathe with the rhythm of the tides, not just existing, but participating in the great cycle of planetary motion. Earth was becoming whole, united in flow. The air above grew clearer, bluer, more serene. Sunlight streamed across mountains and plains, warming the ground, stirring winds that carried whispers across distances. The balance of land and sea began to define climate, dry where stone dominated, cool and moist where oceans lingered. This variation, this contrast, was the first hint of diversity in the world's fabric. At dawn, the continents glowed with color, their edges kissed by waves of gold. At night, they disappeared into shadow, the seas reflecting the distant stars. Time itself seemed to slow in this perfect rhythm, where nothing rushed yet everything moved. The earth was no longer a place of chaos but a living poem written in stone, water, and wind. The first sediments now pressed deep beneath the surface, transforming under heat and weight into new forms of rock. Metamorphosis had begun, the quiet recycling of matter that would continue forever. Nothing on earth remained unchanged, even the stillest mountain carried motion within it, every atom whispering of change. Sometimes, fire broke through the calm, a volcano's roar, a tremor beneath the sea. Yet even these moments of fury seemed to serve the rhythm. Lava cooled into new crust, new minerals rose to the surface, and the balance resumed. Earth's beauty was not in stillness but in her capacity to return, to heal, to continue. Rain, wind, tide, and time, these were her instruments now. Together they composed an endless song, one that could only be heard by those who listened slowly. Every breeze that touched a rock, every wave that kissed a shore, every drop that found its way back to the sea added a note to the planet's growing harmony. In the great expanse of deep time, the continents drifted toward one another, forming supercontinents and breaking apart again. The oceans shifted, finding new paths, whispering against different shores. Yet the rhythm remained, rock rising, sea falling, wind weaving between them. The earth was alive, not in pulse or breath, but in patience. And when the sun set over those primeval lands, the seas shimmered gold and crimson, and the mountains glowed like embers. The wind grew still, the waves softened, and in that twilight peace, the earth seemed to sigh a deep, knowing exhale. Rock and sea had found each other, and in their endless rhythm, they had created harmony. The world had learned balance, and in that balance, life was ready to begin.